I like these podcasts where you hold the mic because it's very stand-up-y. You feel like you're doing a set.
It does. It feels very natural. I've done this with 2 improvisers. And
I don't get it.
Yeah, the holding the mic like.
Oh, I hate that's my biggest pet peeve. You see like someone doing a speech, and they're like, "Well," I'm like, "No one can hear." What are we doing?
So you've been doing it 7 years now?
7, yeah.
And when did you start? Or not when, but like what got you into it?
I did I've always wanted to try it. I always wanted to try stand up, but I took an improv class in college because I was graduating early. I needed like credit, and I was just like, what's an easy class to take? And someone told me about this. It was called like Performance 290 at DePaul, which I didn't even know what it meant. I just was like, I need 3 credits and then I'm going to graduate. So I took it, ended up being an improv class, and I'd never done improv before. I kind of knew what it was, not really. And it was a really fun class. I had like a couple of my friends in the class, and I was like, this is actually pretty fun. And like, this is comedy. It just was different. I never flexed that part of my brain before. But then I kind of forgot about it. And then I started my first job. I was like a finance econ major, so I was working like the banking industry. And then like 6 months into my job, I was like, all right, I'm going to try this stand-up thing I wanted to try. So I went to Shuba's first mic, and just was watching. And I got there, sign up was like 7. Show was at like 7:30. I got there at like 6:45, and I was like 30th on the list. I didn't understand. Like, I didn't know. That was first lesson 1. It's like show up like early to be up. So I'm waiting there, and it's like, this is like a Tuesday. So like I'm not used to like going out after my job. Like, it was just a weird. I was like, what is this life? Like, people just do a second thing, and then I just see people. It was a particularly rough night. Everyone's bombing. I mean, nobody had a good set. Junior Stopka, I don't even know who he is.
Yeah, I heard of him, yeah.
He, at the time, had just been on, Dave Attell had a show called, like, it was Comedy Underground or something on Comedy Central.
Yeah.
So Junior had just been on that show, the Comedy Central kind of, like, spot. And then I see him at this open mic, and I'm like, Chicago comedy's amazing. Like, there's famous people walking around. And I didn't see the famous part for like 5 years after that. But it was just funny because like all this is happening my first night. Like, this is crazy. But then he goes up, and I was like, he'll turn the room. I just saw him kill on this show. Bombs as well. And I was like, oh, this is just what an open mic is. I quickly figured out after like being there for 2.5 hours. So then I go up, and I had like, I didn't write out exactly what I wanted to do. I had a story that I wanted to try to tell.
The story.
I was like, oh, let me talk about this blind date I went on. This would be fucking hilarious, you know? Go up there, and as soon as I stand up there, I grab the mic, and it was Bobby Buds was hosting. If you know Bobby, he's back in Chicago now. Very funny dude, been doing it for a while. Super nice guy, and he goes, "Hey, your next comic's like first time doing stand. Let's give him like a lot of like." He gave me like a nice intro, and so it was like pretty warm at the start because it was like he gave that kind of courtesy. But then as soon as I picked up, like I started talking, I blanked, I froze, I didn't know. I'd never been in front of people like that, and I was like, "Oh, this feels horrible." I forgot everything I was going to say. I said the first line of the story, and then I blanked on the middle, like blacked out, I think. And then I said the end. I was up there for like maybe 2 minutes out of my 4.5. Just horrible set. Like, and then I get down, and I'm like, I feel like horrible. You know, you had bomb, and you're like nervous. It was like to both things together. And so I remember being like, oh, this is insanely difficult. I remember just everything hitting me at the same time. Like, this is super hard. I'm not funny. Like, I had that thought too. I'm like, oh, I thought it was this funny, like, likable person, and I'm like, oh, these people don't care about me. They don't know who I am, because your friends and your family, like, they know you. And so I remember like leaving the mic, and like I was like pretty much third or second to last because I signed up so late, and I didn't know. And so after the mic ended, I was there for like a few minutes, and all these other comics who also like we all bombed. I just remember a couple of them were like, yeah, man, like, that was like that was like fine. The set was fine, like, to each other. And I was like, no, we all bombed. Like, I had the self-awareness then to be like, no, it was all bad. Like, but then you kind of realize, like, these are the mitigation techniques we all have. We were like, oh, man, it wasn't that. It was the room, you know, everyone was bombed. But it's like, it's just so funny. You immediately start to rationalize your bomb.
Yeah.
But I knew then, I was like, no, this is bad. I will not do this again until I get better at this. And then I remember that Second City class, or the improv class I took in college. So I looked into more classes. I was like, that could help me get better on stage, just get more comfortable. And I found Second City. I knew a little bit about it from the class. And then I did the whole improv program there. I did the A through E. And that's where I met 2 other comics who, like, we started a company, started producing shows together. But while I was doing the improv, I started doing stand-up. So I had the kind of safety net of the improv. Every week I'd be on stage there with all these, like, with love and support. And then I'd go and, like, eat shit at open mics all week. But it was like, it was nice having both because I wasn't completely alone. You know, for so long in stand-up, you're totally alone. So that really helped progress me. And then in like 6 months, I was producing my own shows. Like, Jesus. I was like, because you're not getting booked on anything. You're 6 months in.
Yeah, I'm learning.
Yeah. So you have to do your own shit. I was like, well, I have a business background. I have like a professional background. How can I make this better than these? I'm going to these independent, and also I'm going to some of these independent shows that like people who are like my level or like a year in, we're getting booked on. I'm like, these are bad.
Yeah.
Like, this is a bar show, but I'm fighting for this spot. I'm like, I can make a better show.
Yes.
So that's what I did.
As soon as you said I have a business background, I was like, this is making so much more sense.
Yeah.
Like, this is the most dressed down I've ever seen you.
Yeah. I was going to tell you, this is why I knew you weren't doing video because you said stripped down, and I was like, I'll wear my sweatpants. Yeah. That's allowed.
Let's be regular Vic. And we're still somehow looking out on a beautiful pool. But yeah, man, you're one of the things that I think gives you such a leg up in this is that business background. Yeah. Like a lot of comics, for me personally, I came from theater and improv and film, but a lot of comics come from bars and like parties and shit.
Hourly type of stuff, more like babysitting or like service type stuff.
Yeah. And from what I've seen, a lot of like people that begin comedy, they don't understand business and how to present themselves in such a way that's going to make them marketable and things like that. And I assume they figured out later, but it makes you saying that made a lot of things click.
Yeah.
And so you started your show, and then what? How that was 6 months in?
So it was like 6 months in, maybe 6 to 8, and so at this point I was like pretty well into improv. Like I was like on like level C, and so we had a regular cadence. We'd rehearse, we'd like meet, and then the improv team would come and watch me and the other guys who do stand up. So we had this kind of camaraderie around it. And then with the show, we did the first show, and it went really well. We had like 50, 60 people, and we did it at an office building downtown. So we were like, what's different about us? We all have professional jobs. Let's make the venue reflect that, but also be like Chicago comedy, like. So it was really cool because no show's doing that. No show's like so we're after hours in this office building, probably super illegal, but gets around the 2-drink minimum. It's all of our friends because they're all like excited we're doing stand up. So we packed out show, 50 people, but we didn't really know what we were doing. We had like lineups. We printed the lineup. We had like it was like very professional. We had like a PowerPoint with all the acts, like it was legit, and it was super. And I hosted it because I was the senior stand up of the group. I was like I've been doing it 2 more months than everybody else. So I hosted it, and I was like, oh, this is fun. Like this is amazing. And I had like I look at my old like notes from that. I had like the act, and then I had the bit between that I was gonna do. Like I really thought hosting was like, oh, I have a canned bit between each. It was so funny just looking back on it. I had like 7 minutes of material, but so then after the first show, we were like, okay, this went well. Now we want to do it again, but now we're like, oh shit, like all these people are gonna come back next month and 2 months or whatever. So we're like, let's go 2 months. Let's not go next month because we need new material. So it became this thing where we set like targets of like I need a new 5 every month, or like I need a new. And then you realize you're like, oh, that's how you need a goal. Like in stand-up, you can just so aimlessly go to mics and just start doing whatever and trying to like, you're like, I'm doing something, I'm trying to get booked. Like that's everyone's goal all the time is trying to get booked. But having like a goal of, I need to write a new 5 minutes every month. Because if I don't, the people who came and supported me in the first show, all people I know are going to come back and be like, this is the thing, I heard this last month. Mm-hmm. So that really helped kind of click things into place. Because at the time, I was going to open mics, but I was like, let's go to like 1 or 2 a week, maybe 3 or 4. I stepped it up. I did 1 a week, then I went to 2, then I went to 3. And then I was like pretty much on stage every day. But it took a few different iterations of that. So the same thing became with the material. So once that happened, I think people saw I was like working. Because I was like, first of all, we had this show and like, so we kind of put it out there. We had like the photos and stuff, and people were like, "Wait, what is this show?"
What year would it have been? 2000?
This is 2016, I think.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the second show, we had like a little bit of like, it was like comics kind of knew what it was, but no one really else. Second show, we're like, okay, now we have all this stuff we've learned. It's been 2 more months. Now we know how to sell tickets. Like we got a little better about it. So the second show we did, like we were like, let's book all the people we've met in comedy at this point. Like all these people have been nice to us, and so we had this crazy long lineup. We had it was a variety show. So we had an improv group, we had 2 sketch groups, we had stand up, we had like it was too much stuff. But because of that, it was like a production. I mean, we had an involved show, and it was like a 2-hour show. It had 200 people at the show. This is an independent show. This is at an office building downtown.
How big is the office?
So it's like one of their big conference spaces.
Okay.
So it's an amazing. It looks like this. It overlooks Wacker. It was amazing, and then we had all these chairs. So we had the front, and we had like AV set up and all that stuff. All this was like completely. Now to think about it, it's insane because first of all, they let us do this, which is again highly illegal.
Yeah.
But it was BYOB. So you got people bringing like tons of alcohol, just getting fucked up, but having the best time because we're like, it's all our friends, it's people they know, and now we've like done it once, so we had a little bit, but it was way too long. It was like we all went out after the show. It was so fun, but that show put us on the map in the sense of like people heard about that because so many people were involved in the comedy community that like more senior comics were like these guys did this like crazy because we thought we knew it was good, but we didn't understand how good it was.
Right. You get lightning in a bottle almost.
I mean, 200 people at an independent show is insane. I mean, clubs don't even get those numbers sometimes. You know? So you're like, oh, this is crazy. And then I remember we had a guy from Second City come who was one of our teachers at Second City, and he was like, he took the flyer from the show because we had like one of the people in my group is a graphic designer, like designer person, so it's a nice looking flyer. He brought it to Second City, and he's like, this is our competition. Like these people are like a year in a comedy. They're doing way cooler shit than we're doing. And it was like, that was a moment where we're like, oh, this is something we have here. This is something cool. So we just kept doing that. We just kept producing more. We just kept hitting more. And then quickly, the thing became, it kind of became a little of like a, not cockiness, but like, we're going to do our own thing because we're like, we're doing this better. People want to be a part of it. Like, I'm not trying to run and do a show at Shakers on Clark. Okay. Like, I don't like, not at that time. I was just doing mics. We ran our own mic. We had like our own mic. We had a couple shows and one show to 2 shows to 3 shows. One point we had like 6 shows in the city running. I mean, just creating this empire. And now we have like a few, we have like monthlies that are out of town happening. We have like a whole network of shows that we've produced, and we just got better at it, more efficient, like going to venues and being like, here's how to do a show. What do you guys want? What's the budget? How many comics do you want? Like, we just know how to pitch it now. So it's like, it's all repeatable.
You keep saying we. Who else is we?
So it's Tyler Fowler. Who's
Okay. This is all coming.
Yeah. So our group is called T-Mus Comedy. So it's me and Tyler Fowler, and then we also had another individual, Megan Dirty, who used to do comedy and stand-up in Chicago, but moved to L.A. So she's still like part of T-Mus Comedy, but Tyler and I run everything in Chicago. So it's just us two.
I like some Don shit you just said. We run everything in Chicago.
Well,
so you let it slip.
Well, it's like one of those things where it's like, it's kind of nice to have the group we call T-Mus because it's like people don't realize it's just us two.
Right.
But it's nice to have this like, oh, what is this collective? And it's like, it's not really a collective. It seems that way because we're doing so many things. But now we have all the systems in place, and him and I we communicate at the same speed that we don't like. We've been producing together for so long that it's almost like between us we can run this massive amount of things.
That is, man, that's making so okay. You're not an enigma. I use that word too much, but you've always been since moving here. You've always been interesting to watch because I could see you're doing a lot, but the mechanisms and the history behind it, I just had no context. Yeah. That makes so much more sense. I was from Riverside, and we kind of did a similar thing, except it was in the desert where it wasn't Chicago. And the ways I fucked up was like making myself the face of it. And that's never good.
And the thing is, it's one of those things where it's like, do you want the recognition first, or do you want to let people discover it organically? And so we kind of had this 3 people, so it's a democracy. Like everything can be decided majority rules. So that was kind of nice. It also kept us all in check. We all humbled each other because we're all like going to mics together. We're all, doing all the stuff you do when you start. And then we quickly realized we're all so different. Like, Tyler's an incredible comic.
I don't know him at all.
You don't know him, but his style is different than mine. He's he's like a cleaner comic. He's definitely, but we both have the things we align on are like the business sense, the production side. So it was like, we never felt like we were competing with each other. We always were helping each other. So we'd have like writing sessions with me, him, and Meg, and we all had these different things that we brought to the table. So that just helped fuel us because we're like, you'd see like Tyler would get a show, and I'm like, I got to do that show now. Right. Like you kind of have a little healthy competition, but it was good for us because it made us work harder, and we also were like, well, I did that at my show last time. I want to do this at the show next time. So like became this thing where we all kind of were like working really hard because we knew we were almost impressing each other. We're like, well, this is who I care about. I don't care about anyone else's opinion, but it's almost like you want the comics' respect first.
Yes.
And then it quickly became like, now, and then we used to post in the pages like, oh, like, you know, here's our show, and we stopped doing that. We don't want comics to come to the shows. We want audience to come to the shows. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why am I posting about my show that I'm not like? No, we want audience to come. So comics who know what good shows are, will discover it and see it and hear about it, and that's how we always operate too. It's like, so that's why the Team Us thing is nice, because it is this like veil of like what we're doing, but it's people who know, and that's what we want at the show too, comic wise too. If you take the time to take a little second and be like, oh, who runs this, what's going on, like let me do a quick Google search, you're someone we probably want to work with anyway, and we probably already know who you are, and we probably already booked you. So it's like a whole thing. Like Tyler and I are so involved in the scene here that we know who's working and who's not, and then it's like referrals, like people get passed to us and we're tapped in. So it's like it's been nice having that, because now we have these network of shows that we can just do spots on. Mm-hmm. So early on, like if you look at like show posters from like 3 years ago, people are like, how are you doing so many shows? You're doing 10 shows a week. 2 or 3 of those shows are mine. You know?
Okay.
So it's like, and people don't realize that. It's like, oh, I'm doing Oak Park this week. It's like, didn't you do that last one? Yeah, it's my show. I'm doing it every fucking week if I want, you know?
Right.
So it's like that helped. And then it's like you're booking. We book 50 comics a month between our shows, maybe, you know, like at one point it's been more, some points have been less, but we're consistently booking so many people. So we just have we have our kind of hands in everything.
Seems like you have a really healthy ecosystem that's running. So, okay, so you start this around 2016, and I'm picturing the classic Goodfellas. It's slowly building, it's building, and then COVID hits. And that had to have done something. What did that do?
So it was interesting because when COVID hit, we had these shows that we were running in. So we have like shows in Indiana, Wisconsin. We have these one-nighters that we set up now that are kind of been running for a while. And
how many years did it take you to set that up?
I mean, some of them set up very quickly, because some of them are like, hey, we saw you were doing a show in Sussex, and we run a room, and like we want to have a bar. We want to do the same thing. So like it would pop up pretty quick sometimes, like it'd be like that. Some of them we've been doing for like years. It just varies. But it's easy enough, because now how we do it is we just have we ask for a flat fee from the venue. And then we either do it, like first show we try to do, so we get a feel for the room, the audience. And then what we do is we just book a headliner, and then they bring the show. So we pay them the flat fee. They disseminate that amongst whoever they want. So sometimes we've had people do an hour and bring a host. We've had people do a host feature headliner type show. We really just trust the headliners that we work with that well to be like, we know you're going to book a good show. We trust you. So here's the flat fee, figure it out. And it's from an administration standpoint, all we're booking is, for those far out shows, we're just booking the headliner. It's so much easier on us.
Right.
But then we have other shows where we book like the host, and like we have all sorts of things going on. But when pandemic happened, those Midwest ones, some of them were still going. Like,
yeah, I can see that.
Some of them didn't give a shit. You know, Indiana.
Yeah,
like,
Indiana. No one gives a fucking Indiana.
So it actually was kind of nice, because it was some of the shows like both Tyler and I hadn't done in months, because we were just booked on other stuff and busy. So it was like we're coming back, and it's like, oh, it's been 6 months anyway. I'm due back at the show, so now I can do it during the pandemic, keep my skills sharp. Then we were both doing tons of Zoom shows, corporates. So I never stopped doing stand up. I mean, it was just doing different stuff.
Oh boy, how do I put this? You're an exciting person to talk to.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. No, man. Like that work ethic and that organization. The organization of it is incredible. Do you need to do that?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I just locked in a spot, so you're good.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Don Vic.
Good for the podcast. Let them know I'm not just saying this shit. I'm out here living it every day.
Man, he's really doing this.
Really
living that life.
About to do that open mic Laugh Factory. What's up? Get unpaid spot.
Man. You how do I put it? I'm impressed by the maturity and the swiftness in which you went about this. Like, you know, I mean, like we were saying earlier, comics come and go within 3 months. Yeah. And you can see people with that same, I had the same ego too going in, like, all my friends laugh when I talk.
Oh, that's just the comedy. It just humbles you, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a,
It's good, though. You need that.
Yes.
I mean, it changed my perception of who I thought I was.
When I meet comics who bomb and don't realize they bomb, I'm like, you're never going to.
No.
You're not going to be.
Or you're never going to make it. You're never going to be good.
Right.
That's the thing. That's the thing that, though, you have to realize, though. Sometimes there are people who are so delusionally confident and so insane that they keep powering through, and eventually they get shit. Because a lot of comedy too is like tenure. Like there's things that I realized this like a few years ago. Like there's things that I wanted to do that I'm like, I wish I should be doing that right now. And like then I realized I'm like, oh, it'll happen. Just a matter of staying in the game and staying in the pocket long enough. Like, and things come to you that way then the way they're supposed to. Right. Versus if you try to reach, you obviously are trying to reach all the time. You're trying to get on shows, you're submitting, but once you get to a point where you're doing enough. When you submit or if you reach out, first of all, they'll reach out to you a lot of times. But if you reach out, the response you get is so different. Like now when I submit to stuff sometimes like locally, people are like, oh yeah, well like we'll have, don't even like send a clip, like we'll have you on. Like
really? Like
people are mad that I'm asking to do the show. Like
because you've just built up this.
But they know I do enough that like we've seen you working, we see you around. And like it's nice to have that now. But I never assume that because you want to always approach it with like humility and be like, hey, I'd love to do your show. Like I've heard good things about it. And now locally, at least I've done most of the things I want to do. So it's like, now it's a matter of looking at the next things. Like what am I trying to target now? Now it's all about headlining weekends. It's all about road work. Like the local scene, for so long, you're so in the local scene. Then you realize like, this is 1% of what comedy is. I mean, I'm making like money now on the road. Like I'm actually doing longer sets, like running hours, 45 minutes. Like that's huge. Yeah. So all during the week now, it's all for fun. Like now I'm just fucking around, trying new jokes. Like, but it took it. Now I also feel the confidence to do that. Like I don't need to prove myself anymore. Yeah. And it's the best place to be because now I can go and do whatever I want. And it took a while to build that up, but like now I feel like I finally am there.
It seems like it from what I've seen. I've only been here like 8-9 months, but I can definitely see the work that you have a solid foundation. Yeah. Now I remember earlier when you were talking about, this goal, 5 minutes every 2 months, 5 minutes, and your history in business and marketing,
business, and then I work in HR now, like recruiting, employee engagement, all that sort of stuff.
For you, where is the line between the business and the art? Because it seems like, and this is just me taking what you're saying, it seems like you lean into the business end of this. Yeah. And you're not I've been doing this podcast for a while, and the different comics I meet and their styles, I meet like hyper artsy, like that just totally lean into grunge, punk rock, comedy. Yeah. How would you describe yourself in the artistic space?
So that's the balance that I think is important to find. Like I'm reading this book now. What is it called? Something about basically it's like tapping into your creative artist and like how to like keep that they call it like a creative well, how to keep that fresh, because otherwise pre-pandemic, I mean we were kind of talking about it before we started recording, but I was working full-time at a startup. I was a director, so I was working like 60 hours a week in my day job, and I was doing comedy mainly. I was traveling here and there, but like for like the smaller stuff, but I was still traveling once in a while, and I was doing comedy every day here, running all these shows. So I was between the two working like 100 hours a week, also in a relationship, also like seeing my family. Like I was doing so much, and I don't know how I did that for so long, but I think when you're that busy and you just are locked in, you just like find that groove. It's momentum. And that's what comedy is. Like so much of this is like, oh, I got this thing, I got to take it to the next thing. It's like, yes, that's true, but it's also like the pandemic was nice because it forced me to pause and like be like, okay, what are the things I can stop doing? What do I not need to do? And do I need to be... So one thing we started doing is we have all these shows, we have these things. Now, I don't need to be at all of them anymore. Like I've accepted that. I'm like I can't be at everywhere at once. So now I'll look at it from like a time perspective. I'm like, hey, Saturday, for example, right? I did CG's. I featured at CG's. Then I headlined a show that they asked us to produce, but it was like a monthly show. It was just the first one. And then I had the Comedy Clubhouse. So the way it worked out time-wise is I had to go up right after my set at CG. I had to leave. Then I had to go to this other thing. So at this point, I've done 30 minutes at CG's. Now I'm doing 40 at this other show. Now I'm at an hour and 10. Now, do I need to go to Comedy Clubhouse to do 8 minutes for 8 people that happen to be there? Or should I just go home and then reset for the next day? So it's like all these little decisions you have to make. And like 2 years ago, I would have done that. It doesn't even matter what I did before. Even I'd be my girlfriend would be in the car. I'd be like, we're going on this next show. Like it was bad. Like I was getting to a point now.
So like an addict almost.
Almost like it was addictive. And it's like you just, to your point, you're so in the business mindset that you forget that you need to actually live your life and do things. And like, so it's important to like sometimes say no to shit. Because if you don't, all your material is just, you become executional. You don't become creative at all. So I really try to find that balance. Some weeks I'm still way too executional, but that's just, sometimes it just happens. Like, this week I'm traveling all week, and it's like, it just happens. So.
It seems like your brain works. You seem like a guy who, when in Looney Tunes, when they would go inside the character's brain and you literally see bolts, you seem like you have bolts and shit going through your head.
It's very tactical. It's very like, I love like organization, efficiency. I love that side of it. I love a process. I
Super
love routine. Hot. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's why I'm single now. Yeah. So it's just, I love that shit, and bless that woman for putting up with it for 5 years. But it is.
Oh, this was a recent breakup.
Yeah, yeah. So I met her when I started comedy. So like, that was also what helped, is because we met when we started. So I was less busy. So she kind of built with me as I built up too. But it was, I think it is. Now I'm trying to do things that like, I have routine now that I do. Like I read a little bit every day. I write a little bit every day. I try to do something that's like not comedy related once a week, like just to do shit, and it's sad, but you have to schedule that time for yourself. Like you need to, otherwise all your material becomes, I was at this show and this happened, or you just become miserable. You start falling out of love with it. Like you need to step away a couple times. Like sometimes I know after been like 14 days of shows in a row, I'll be like, I need a day to like, otherwise I hate comedy now. I'm at the point where I hate it. So yeah,
man, you're speaking to my soul right now. That's spot on to how I'm feeling right now. And I'm curious, the way you grew up, were your parents encouraging of, like, how do they feel when you were like, I'm going to do comedy?
Well, they're even though they're like Indian, they have the traditional like hard work, all that stuff, like pushing you to, but their always thing was pushing me to be self-sufficient. So they didn't necessarily care I was doing comedy. They just wanted me to be able to take care of myself. So that was a big thing, was like, that's why I had that job for so long. And I think it also, all the advice I've gotten is don't quit your day job until you have to. And I didn't have to. I mean, it was a little insane, but I didn't have to. And now post-pandemic, I feel like now I have a good balance of like 3 days a week on. It's still pretty busy Monday through Wednesday, but like now Thursday, Friday, I have the whole day. I can catch up. I can travel. It's not like as bad as it was, and I don't need to respond to shit till the next week. So it is busy, but it's like, it would be a little busier for a weekly check plus comedy. Like it's just a lot more security, and I can like. My parents don't worry because they know I have that job. So they're kind of like, and now they've seen me, like they saw me headline Zanies. Like they've seen me do things and my career has progressed. So they're like, oh, he's actually doing this now. It's not just some bullshit.
Yeah. I'm sorry I have the biggest smile on my face. I know that nobody can see it, but
it's just like, it's cool when people, obviously your parents, you want them to be proud of you.
Of course.
So it's like, it's funny because they've literally seen me at the host level of my career, the feature level of my career, and the headline. It's kind of cool to, like, they come every 2-3 years. So every time they've seen me, it's been drastic jumps. Yeah. So that's kind of cool because I think the last time they saw me was like a show at the Annoyance, which is compared from that to sold out Zanies. Right. Like it's crazy. Like I was like, oh, that's my I was showing my mom like that's my picture right there. Like it was awesome. It was like so cool to be like, this is what I've been doing in my life for the last 7 years. Like this is what I'm doing.
You haven't just been fucking around.
Yes.
It's really hard to explain to people outside of comedy that, like, wait, so you're gonna go to an open mic? Like,
you're not getting paid though. What
are you doing? Oh, so you're going on Wednesday? Yeah. I thought comedy happened Friday and Sunday.
Saturday, no.
Yeah,
good comedy happens on Fridays.
Jesus. But so when I first got to Chicago, I was super cagey and I was like very quiet and just observing people. You were one of the people that I remembered. I want to say the first time I saw you was at Red Room, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then I just saw you periodically from there. And I remember just comparing and contrasting you to everyone else I saw. Like, we keep I'm beating a dead horse with the business stuff, but I just remember a sense of slick professionalism. I'm very curious. Do you remember me when you first met me?
I believe I remember you at either Comedy Bar or Red Room. I remember you were just. I think you went up. I think I saw you go up. Okay. So I remember being like, "Oh, you got good." I remember just like same thing. I do the same thing. You're like, "Oh, this guy's got stage presence, got some jokes." Right. Like, I like listened, which I think doing comedy, you're in the room, but you're kind of like, I'm worried about my set, or I'm like, for me, I think at that show, I was like probably running to something else. So it's like you're kind of in your head about whatever you're in your head about, or just running your own bits. But I remember when you went up, I was I was like, oh, this guy, like, I don't know who this guy is because you were new to Chicago. And I was like, oh, but he's good. Like, I remember noting that. And then I think afterwards you said, like, you said, hey, I've seen you around. Like, you said something like that. You're like, hey, I've seen you. And that was like our interaction. But then after that, I think then we kind of started talking more and more because I'm like, oh, I'd seen you at that thing.
By the Bulba place too?
Yeah.
Were you there for the homeless guy that came?
I don't think so.
Oh, yo, it was a whole other thing. But then there was a moment when you were at Enjoy that watching your... I don't know if you're aware of how fascinating of a person you seem to be, but like watching you think is interesting. Have you ever noticed anybody watching you think?
No, but tell me, because Enjoy was interesting. So tell me what happened.
Okay, I want to tell you my perspective and assumptions, and I would really love your actual opinion. So I brought you there, and I remember getting up like 10, 15 minutes before the show was actually supposed to start.
Yeah.
And I remember it was either you or somebody else was like, wait, not yet. And I was like, no, trust me. Or something dumb like that.
Yeah.
And
I got this.
I got this. I said something like, I got this, which is always what people say right before they die in horror movies. Like, don't worry, man. We'll figure this out.
It's safe.
Yeah. No, I'll go into the woods. I just heard something rustling. And I remember the wheels were turning in your head, and it felt as though you were kind of doing not a puzzle, man. You were thinking. It felt like you were thinking, why is he doing this? Like it felt like there was a real thought process going on. And then did the whole thing. Then I think you went up pretty early. You went up first.
I had to go to another show. Yeah.
You went up first, and I stood in the corner where I wrote the list, and I was watching you watch the show, being creepy, and you looked like you were like, what is it? Have you ever seen Usual Suspects?
No.
Have you ever seen a movie where there's a reveal and you're like, oh, interesting?
Yeah.
That's how it felt. It felt like in the beginning you were like hesitant, and then as it went on, you were like, oh, I see whatever this room is.
Yeah.
I would love whatever you were thinking. It would be I'm very curious.
I think there is like a part of every show you go to where you have to accept your fate. Like,
yeah.
That probably was that. So that's a little bit of that. I think half that is like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like I've accepted. Maybe that part of it was hesitation. Like I don't know if I want to do this. But then you're like, oh, this is actually a fun room. And then actually, to your credit, when you went up and hosted, I was like, oh, he's hosting the shit out of this show. Like this is a real. He's doing well. Like he's doing really well. Given all the things that are happening, there's people walking in. There's fucking crazy shit. There's people blacked out. Like it was a lot going on, and you handled it really well. And I was like. So it put me a little bit, that's why I was kind of thinking, because I'm like, now I'm looking, I do all the stuff I do at a normal show. I'm like, what can I make fun of? What can I talk about? What hasn't been mentioned? So I'm running through the checklist in my head. And that's half what I was doing too, is like, oh, Aaron didn't notice that this is going on over here. And then so as soon as I went on stage, I did like 3 jokes right at the top of the room. Like first one was like, something about making fun of the decor. It was like Halloween. It was like I was like I don't know what I said. I was like, it looks like a divorced dad trying to do Christmas in here, like making some dumb jokes about the room. Immediately fire off with 2 or 3 quick observational things, and then I settled into like the first joke, and then I was like, oh, then I got a good reception. I'm like, okay, now it's like so you build slowly, but it was a lot of like what I do a lot. I think is. Because you do so many shows that you have to almost have that like that time before is important to kind of like observe what's going on, and now I've learned more and more at stand-up is like you're going over your set, you're looking at your jokes, but so much of it is like being present in the room. And like at that point too, am I really going to like, if I look at my notebook one more time, am I going to like, is it going to translate? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's more important to be like, what can I talk about here that's these people care about, that I try to do that more now. Like I actually learned this a little bit. I think Calvin Evans does this really well. I've never seen him with the notebook. Never seen him write anything down. He will show up to the show with nothing, just like his shoes and hats, and he will just go on stage and he'll do a couple jokes usually about the room or like settle in, and then he'll start his set. But what that shows me, what that tells me, I haven't talked to him about this, but I can imagine this is what it is. It was what I try to do now. He already knows what he's gonna do, in the sense of he knows, like, he's done the work at home. He's like, I've written this or I've prepared this. This is what I'm gonna get into. But when I get to the venue, from that point on, I'm present with the venue. And I think that that is huge. Because then you see people who don't do that, and they go on stage and it's like, so let me tell you a little bit about me. I'm like, someone just vomited 2 feet away from you. You're not going to talk about that at all? Like, you have to be, and that's make or break sets. Like, people have, I mean, sometimes, to be fair, you don't talk about what you wanted to talk about because so much shit is happening, you need to address it. But that's what comedy is. Like, it's dynamic. So you can't just be like so, I mean, I understand people, I respect process. I'm a process person, but this is where my creative side kind of comes in because I'm like, oh, I like the ambiguity. I like not knowing what's going to happen. And like doing that show with you, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to talk about. I got to the 1 or 2 jokes I wanted to try, but for the first like 4 minutes, I was like, I'm just figuring out this room.
Yeah.
And once I figured it out, I'm like, okay, now I have them. Now I can try the new shit.
It's I love that room. Yeah. I love it so much.
I'm excited to do it again. And now, to your point, now I know you're like, come later because that's when it gets kind of like more. And now I think I can like, for whatever other show I do, I'm like, let me go, I'll flip it.
Right.
You know, like now I know that. So it's like little things you do. You have to, but there's no way I necessarily would have known that before.
Yeah. It's an experiment.
Yeah.
And with you, I have a few things here. I've been writing on my little notebook. You said that you went through this breakup. I don't know if that's something you want to talk about. If not,
yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. So, but like that, the relationship, I've come to realize like this comedy thing decimates relationships.
Yeah,
it makes it so hard to connect with somebody romantically because all the times that you would be doing romantic shit is when you're doing comedy. But with her, she came up in it.
Yeah, so what was nice about it is that's why I give her a lot of credit, and that's why I don't mind talking about it because I think it's nice to give her that credit when it's due. Like we had a good foundation. We used to work together, so I'd see her during the day a lot. And then when we stopped working together, but we'd see each other a couple times a week. She'd come to shows or whatever. So like it built, we had that every day we'd see each other for like 6 months. And then it went to like, we weren't seeing each other every day, but we'd see each other during the week once or twice a week. And then we would do one show and then we'd go to dinner. We'd have these things. Now, I mean, then it got to a point where it was like, okay, now we're seeing each other once every 2 weeks. And for her, she's like a normal 9 to 5 person. So she's like, I'm not free during the week. She lives outside of the city. So it's like, she's coming to see me on a Friday or Saturday. I'm doing 3-4 spots on a Friday, Saturday. So she's coming to all the fucking spots, which is amazing. I told her all the time, like, I would not do this if the situation was reversed.
Yeah.
So
it's very supportive of her.
Very supportive. But also what was nice about that, even though, to your point, yes, you're not doing the romantic, like, you're not really talking, it was still nice because she had, like, the access that, like, she's in the green room. She's hanging out with us. She's, like, she knows comics. She's having a different experience of the show. And she's a fan of comedy. So I would always feel bad. I'm like, I feel bad I'm dragging these shows. She's like, no, I like comedy. Like, I enjoy being here. And I'm still with you, like, during all this. And then after the shows, we'd figure it out, like, we'd go get a drink. We'd have that alone time, but, I mean, it was a lot. It's a lot to deal with. It's 3-4 hours, and you're, like, exhausted by the end of the night. But then I would be like, well, I'm going to make time for you now because you've stuck with me for this whole time. So we did that stuff, and that was kind of nice. But it got to a point where during the pandemic, that's what kind of fucked us up is because she was taking care of her parents who are elderly, and I'm doing shows in Indiana, and like no one's leaving their house. So it's like, she's like, I can't see you because of that. And I get that. I was like, yeah, it's totally fair. And I thought it'd be cool. I was like, yeah, we'll talk. Like we talked on the phone every day. But it quickly, you forgot how important that in-person communication is. Because now we're just like pen pals. Yeah. And we're not getting that in-person time. So we didn't have that for like 6 to 8 months. And I didn't see her for that long. And then I was like, oh, this is not like working. And then I also was my career was going, the pandemic probably helped me by 1 or 2 years in the sense it pushed me from a club feature to a headliner. Really? Because clubs couldn't have like the Netflix headliner come in. Oh. But they're like, hey, we know you have the time. We're only half capacity. We can only pay you this much, but you're local. Can you do it? And of course, you're like, yeah, of course I want to headline. First club I headlined was, I think, CG's Comedy Club in Bolingbrook. There's 25 people per show. Also, way less pressure. I'm like, I can fill 25 seats a night instead of 100. Yeah. So that helped. And once I headlined that, then I headlined like the Market in Valpo, and then like all these other things started knocking down one at a time. But it was because I think the pandemic, in a way, that pushed people to take chances on local people a little bit more. You were the first person I've talked to who was like, yeah, the pandemic boosted me. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, also, again, I was working, though. Well, like, yeah, of course. I did tons of Zooms. I never stopped being out there, because some people have disappeared and never come back, which is fine. But some people are like mad that they didn't do anything for 2 years. They came back like, why is it not all the same? I'm like, because the landscape has changed. You're here. Comics have moved here.
Yeah.
Comics have quit. New shows have started. Clubs have closed. Clubs have opened. Like, if you weren't aware of that or you weren't tapped in, like, you've missed it by like 6 months. Like, Tyler and I were talking about the other day. We came out of the pandemic. We had 20 new minutes out of the pandemic. Like, people are doing jokes. I've heard them do. It's fine, but it's just like you didn't use the time for what it was. And I'm not. Again, I don't care what anybody else does. Like, it's just interesting to know. Now I'm like, oh, I feel good about putting out this. I can drop content now weekly because I have the content now. I don't mind burning that material because I'm like, yeah, I have a new half hour ready to go. So it's like I don't care about. And now you're realizing more and more content is the game. So you're like, oh, it's nice to have this backlog because I can put all this stuff out, and people like, it's been 2 years since they've heard that joke because no one remembers pre-pandemic. They're like, man, that's a new joke. I'm like, I guess. Do you? Yeah, do you?
Might as well be.
So it's kind of nice to have this like old stuff to recycle now and put that out.
I know I keep kind of harping on this, but you're they say be careful the company you keep.
Yeah.
I don't know what is the reverse of that. The careful the company you keep, the people that you should be around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's surround yourself with people. I've always done it. Surround yourself with people who are like better than you or like working harder than you.
Yeah.
You work harder. You know.
Yeah, I'm seeing the pool and I'm like, I need to do something. Like,
it's legit. Like, I used to be when I started comedy. I didn't know. I would show up to open mics. I'd be like coming out of work. I'd be in like a suit or like a dress shirt, and I'd see the worst dressed people I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, for first, like, I was uncomfortable a little bit. Then I realized I'm like, oh wait, this sets me apart.
Is that where
yeah.
Okay, so you were coming off of work and you were like, I'm already dressed like this.
Yeah, I'm not going home and changing because first of all, I realized I had to get to mics early. Mics at 6:30. I had to get there at 5 to sign up. So like, I would not have time necessarily. You're in the office at this point. You're going into the office at different times. So you'd have to go directly after work, or sometimes you just, whatever it would be. So sometimes come in, I'd come in dressed up. But then I also thought that doing comedy, like I'm like, oh, I had this thought of like when I go perform, I should be dressed up. Like I should be in a certain, then I realized like nobody around was doing that. And this is comics now. It's gotten a little bit better for sure.
Yeah.
I think people are realizing as I put more content online, like I don't want to look shitty if my clip is going to be out there forever.
Of course.
But it was bad. Like when I started, it was real bad. It was like the t-shirt and jeans was like the standard comic look. So I stuck out so much because it was like, I also made it a point to be like, no, I want to stand out.
Yeah.
And I think it helped because now people who, like I've been doing it now 7 years, the first 2 years I was like pretty buttoned up, and now everyone who you talk to who's like started comedy at that time, we're like, oh yeah, like this is Vic's thing, like he just does that.
Yeah.
And even newer comics, like, oh, you're always like you even thought it, and you've only been here 8 months, so it's like that stuck, that has stuck, and I'd rather that stick than something else, you know?
Yeah.
That's not a bad. I'm like, yeah, great, I look good, like I don't know what that's a bad thing, like I don't care.
Man. It's interesting because seeing you dressed down, you are a different person.
Yeah.
You look like a different person. The dressed up, it does give this air of confidence. There's an inherent confidence that comes with that.
You can't. It's hard to bomb in a suit. You know?
Yeah. Even if you start bombing, you can chastise them, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we should feel bad."
It's also I think there's an inherent bias with the crowd. I think there's an inherent bias of we all do this. Think about you're in the street and you see a guy in a suit walking the loop. You immediately have 5 or 6 things. You're like, oh, this guy's probably like a finance guy or he's successful. If he like looks sharp, he doesn't look, he looks put together. You're like, he probably makes a lot of money. He's probably important to some degree. But you also have some negative connotation. He's also a douchebag or whatever. So that's why it's important. But that first thing, that importance thing, that is huge. And when you're a stand-up, you go on stage. Seinfeld was like, you should dress better than your audience. He's always in a suit. You know, and he's done pretty well for himself.
He seems to be doing
okay.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's also like. Then I realized I'm like, it's not about suits. It's not about all this dress. It's just about having like a curated look.
Yeah,
and that's what I think I've realized.
Do you feel like that look represents you?
Yeah, and that's why I think the suits definitely represent me, but it was only one side of me. Then I started doing like the bomber jackets and the leather jackets. And I'm like, oh, this is more kind of who I am. Like, and then I think it's funny because then I go on stage and I'm now starting to do a lot more material. I'm like self-deprecating than I used to do, And I think it's nice because like they can see I'm put together, so it also kind of heightens it. They're like, he's self-deprecating, but he's not like, we don't feel bad for him.
Right.
Because sometimes you see comics do self-deprecating material and the audience is like, aw.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I'm like, these are jokes. Like these are.
It feels very Ryan Reynolds-esque.
Yeah.
Where.
And I don't want that. At least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a fan base?
Now I think I do. It's slowly been growing. I think pandemic has helped, but I've noticed now when I post about, like, say I post, I'm going to be at the Laugh Factory, I'll post on my story, I'll get people hitting me up like, hey, can I get tickets? And it's like, it's weird because you don't like, you're not used to that. You're just like, oh, it's like, oh, people actually want to see me, or they just want free tickets. But either way,
they're coming to the show.
They're coming to the show, and for me, it's always been about filling seats. So, yeah, it's kind of wild. And I have people who I've met now, like 2-3 years ago, who I'll do the same show like every 6 months or every year, and they come to the same show. Like in the show I do in Michigan, this group of nurses all came down and they saw me the first time I did the show, and I didn't have a great set. It was a tough room, but after the show, they like really, they're the only people my age, so they resonated my material, and they were just like, yeah, we're on like a girls' weekend. We all live with our like husbands and families, and they're like, do you want to just like drink with us a little bit? And we had this like amazing night. Like we got kind of fucked up. I drove home, mistake, but whatever. It was like wild, and then that bonded us. Yeah. And then now, like, one of them has come to Chicago. She came and saw me at Zany's with her whole family. Like, wild, like, connection you made. But just from that one show, like, so you never know who's at the show. And even though as a comic, like, I'm in fucking Saugatuck, I'm in Michigan, like, what is my life? But now I feel like I made a fan for life. Like, I really understand that fan relationship now. It is important to foster that. It's so much of this is like she probably has sent my clips to her friends, and like you got to think about that. You don't know, but it's reaching so many people. Yeah. And I've noticed that's how I've grown a lot too, is like people sharing my shit, which is awesome.
That, man, yeah. I'm taking everything you're saying, and I'm gonna re-listen and steal some of your thoughts, ideas. Yeah. Like right now. So when I first got here, I was like, I guess I just hit all of the open mics. Yeah. Like I did the open mic thing, and I ran myself into the ground. Sure. And then I started talking with Rachel Hall more. She says hi, by the way.
She's great. One of my favorite people of all time.
And for a good couple months, she was like, you should work smarter, not harder. Yes. And I was like, fuck you. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And as a very, very recent, I would say maybe the past month and a half, I've clicked more into that now. Yeah. This, being choosy about mics a little more. Like what mic is actually helping. Yeah. What mics can I get booked off of? Things like that. But the one thing that I really liked that you did was that you set up your own shows. Yeah. And with Enjoy, I want, maybe not necessarily just Enjoy, but I want to start doing that. And I wonder, how did you find the balance between setting up your own shows but also hitting mics and doing other shit?
Well, we started with just like a monthly, because monthly is a lot more of a reasonable. You have a whole month to promote it, but you're also not stressed. It's like, oh my god, it's next week. You're like, I have time. I can, and in that month, we then use that time to build the 5 that I talked about. So the 5 you have this goal that you're like, I have this long-term goal in a month. I got to deliver a new 5 minutes. What do I need to do to get there? So on a given week, you're like, well, I have all week now, so I'm going to hit 2 or 3 mics. I'm going to, try to, maybe I got booked on a show or something. So it kind of helped you, like, short-term to long-term goal. It helped you ladder that up, and that balance was important. You realize, like, oh, it's important to have, like, a goal a little farther out and then have these small goals. That's what, it gave me kind of that focus, and I think that's what importance of producing, because we were getting to a point where we're producing too much. We had 3 people though. Now we have 2. Now we're probably producing the same as we were, but we're just so much more efficient because we've been working together for so long. And a lot of this stuff is like self-running now. Right. Like it is a matter of like coordination, but we've got the systems in place to kind of do it. But it used to be a lot more like, this is the first time we're doing this. So production was a lot. Like you're like, I have to go to the venue. I got to talk to the owner. I got to, like sell them a little bit. Be like, hey, this is what we've done. And then have to liaison with all the people in the show. Like there's a lot more stuff. Now it's like, we have the people we work with and it's like easy, it's quicker, but there is still a little bit of that for sure. So you do have to balance it, but we were just realizing we're getting so much stage time. So it was almost like self-serving. You're like, well, I don't know if we want to start a 3rd show, but that's another spot for us. So when you don't have any shows for a week, I mean, literally 1 week, I think it was a good example. I think like Tyler or me, one of us had like our whole week like canceled or something. We had like a few other shows that all canceled. And then in a matter of just looking at our calendars, like, well, that canceled, but here, we have our show on Thursday, we have it on Saturday, and then we have a Sunday pop-up. Mm-hmm. You just picked up 3 spots that you lost, and they're all still going to be pretty decent. Mm-hmm. So, like, that was like a clicking moment of like, oh shit, like we can run our own stuff and not worry about. Then you don't feel the pressure after a certain point of like, I gotta hit this mic because if I don't, I'm not gonna get up again till X, you know. So it became this thing of like, it became a necessity of like, this is stage time,
right?
You know.
So right now, okay, interesting. So right now I have Enjoy. It's every Tuesday, but it is flipped. So the other guy who runs it runs.
So it's every other week for you. Yeah.
Well, every other month. So he'll do it for a month, then I'll do it for a month.
But it's still nice because you're building the weekly cadence rapport there.
Right, right. Yeah. And then the dress thing, man, dude. For my whole life, I was always a contrarian. I was always like, if someone told me to do something, I was always like, no, fuck you. I'm doing the opposite. And one of the things people were like, well, you gotta dress better. And I'm coming into myself a little more. I got a nose ring.
No, this is good luck. You got a collar shirt. You got some jewelry.
You know, got some Timbs that are a little dirty. But if you could describe if you were my tailor. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not a suit guy. What would you describe what is this?
This seems to me like preppy street. like a little J. Coley, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
But it's a good look. I think it's good. You look like you took time. It's like intellectual. Mm-hmm. It makes you look, for some reason, it makes you look smart. Which I think, listening to your comedy and the way you speak on stage and off, I think that's what you want. Mm-hmm. I don't think you're trying to come across as at least this is my perception. You can tell this is good for you. Tell me if I'm wrong, but
I'm excited.
You seem thoughtful when you're up there.
I am.
Yeah, and I think you are, and I see you thinking on stage. I can see you doing it, and that's why I think it's important because I'm like, oh, you figured out what the room needs and you've adjusted. And then even that night when we were at Enjoy, you had to switch in that host mode. You went up and you got people in. You're happy. You're high energy, and it worked. It got the show focused. And then we went to that thing after where I was like, hey, come to my buddies. And then you switch into like, I'm going to lock in for my 5. And now you're on the finals thing. So you're able to kind of do that, which is important. And I think that's cool to see because that's something that someone who's thoughtful. If you weren't thoughtful, you're like, well, I'm going to do the same 5 minutes I did to Enjoy. Mm-hmm. And that was it. That was the methodology. But you didn't do that. So that keyed me in to be like, oh, he's like thoughtful about this. So if you're that type of person, not to say you need to be thoughtful about what you're wearing, but it's like, why not? It's just another tool you have, you know?
Yeah. Interesting. I have more things about me, and then I have another thing about you, and then I think we'll have to wrap this up. Yeah, sure. One of the things I've been since moving here. Also, tell me if we need to wrap up. Okay. One of the things since moving here that's been important to me is being around black people. That's partly from growing up around racist white people, and then coming out here and being around black people. That's a big thing for me. And the South Side is black comedy at its best. Yeah. And I'm struggling with it because on one end, I'm like, it does feel good. It's a challenge. It is something different. And I'm definitely not going to stop. Regardless of what you say, I'm not going to not go down there, obviously. But
no, I would not say that. I would say keep doing it.
Thank you. My frustration is on a fan base level or an audience level. I think I'm coming to a place where I'm like, I know that this isn't my audience. Yeah. And that is been interesting. Like, I don't know the mentality I need to go into now when I go to the South Side because there's such an aggressive experience. Yeah. And I know, like, these motherfuckers aren't. Like, you live on 119th. You don't give a fuck about my experience. You don't relate to me in that way. What would you... Do you ever go out of your way to be in front of audiences where like, these motherfuckers aren't going to like me?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff... first of all, I very understand what you're saying. You're like, these are people I want to be around, but at the same time, I feel weird because I know this is my material. Might not necessarily resonate, but I feel like I want to be around them because this is like who I identify with and all that stuff. So it's a tough thing. I think that sometimes when I do these, like, I've done these like Indian shows where it's like I'm opening for this like huge Indian comedian who speaks Hindi, and I'm doing stand up in English, and it's not all about being Indian. I struggle with that too sometimes, and I worry about it. But what I've learned is it is important to put yourself in these situations where you're not in front of your crowd, because otherwise you can get too comfortable, you can get too niche. Yeah. Which when you start comedy, you can't be niche. If you want to work, you have to be wide appeal, mass appeal, right? So maybe in 5-10 years you can get to a point where you're like, oh, I mean, my crowd will come to see me, and like, you know, like Mark Maron, I'm sure isn't like, I'm going to perform for a black room.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm Mark Maron. I can go sit and people know who I am, and they want my voice to have a podcast. I have this stuff, so people know who he is already. But when you're people like us who aren't really known, you have to kind of, I mean, if you, again, this is just, it's still a choice. You don't need to do this. It's just a lot harder of a road to go down if you pick this niche early and don't try to do anything else. Because you're like, I've seen it work though. Like Sarah Squirm, I don't know if you know who she is. She was, I think her character was called like, or her show was called Hell Trap Nightmare, and she's basically this comic, very funny, is on SNL now, was in Chicago, moved to New York, and then got on SNL. But essentially her whole thing was she's this like shock kind of gross comic, but she's very like, she does big characters, and like all her shows were like, she's got like fake blood on stage, like wild shit, like very much like it's clearly a joke. Theatrical.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where like she then built a fan base of that here and became kind of legendary here, and then moved to New York, and then still did that, didn't change, and then got on SNL.
Right.
But also, again, being very talented, being very funny, but like that was someone who I would watch and I'd be like, oh, this is like, you could never do this in like XYZ room, but she never changed. And that was kind of cool to watch, because you're like, oh, this is someone who's committed so hard.
Right.
And it paid off. So it does pay off. I think what I would do is I would do the road. So I would go, even now, I'll pick up these gigs from like Funny Business, which are in somewhere like Portage, Michigan, or some weird place that's like, I go in there and the stage has like a Confederate flag behind it, and it's like, I'm the only person who looks like me, and I'll go on stage and I'll be like, I'll make these people laugh, and like it's cool to see, because you're like, oh, actually my material translates to more people than I thought, which is enlightening for me. I'm like, I didn't think they would get that joke, so it kind of makes you, it's kind of cool in a way, but sometimes it also doesn't work. Like sometimes you find, I was in like outside of Ohio and I did a joke about something about like, not like an abortion joke, but something about like touching on that subject.
Yeah.
And I'd done 20 minutes. I'm killing with other shit, like wild stuff that I wasn't expecting them to get. As soon as I hit that specific thing, they locked up, and I was like, and I literally on stage, I'm like, oh, so that's the line. They all started laughing, because they're like, yes, like they kind of, it was kind of an interesting moment where we all acknowledged that was it. Yeah. And again, I made a comment about it, I moved on, but it was like, it still was 90% of what I wanted to do, I could do. So it is this balance of like being an artist and being true to who you are, but it also is understanding this is a job and we're entertaining people, and to be the most versatile comic, I think, is be able to do all the rooms. And you know, I'm doing literally in the same boat. I'm going to be in Nashville doing this like private Indian show, and this black comic who I met down there is like, he produced all these black rooms. He's like, hey, I want you to come and do my room. He's like, we'll make you like the headliner. We're gonna like it's, so he's talking all this stuff, and I was like, part of me is a little scared, you know. Because I've done the black rooms, and I haven't done one in a minute, and I also am now like, well, he knows me, he knows more, like he thinks that I'm gonna, like, my audience is gonna be there, but I'm like, it's also gonna be a lot of like other people who don't know who the fuck I am at all. So it's like, but part of me is also like, I'm competent enough to do this. Like, I'm a comedian, I can do it. So
please let me know how it goes.
Yeah, and I'm gonna do it. I mean, it's also like, I'm already there. So
yeah, of course. You know? All right. Well, I want. You got more shit to do, and yeah. All right. The end.
I love this. It's so stripped down.
I don't know. That's how it ends.
This was cool. Thanks for coming over too. I appreciate it.
Thanks for doing it.